Then Pippin stabbed upwards, and the written blade of Westernesse pierced through the hide and went deep into the vitals of the troll, and his black blood came gushing out. He toppled forward and came crashing down like a falling rock, burying those beneath him. Blackness and stench and gushing pain came upon Pippin, and his mind fell away into a great darkness. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I bring you all an epic character history on Pippin Took, better known as Pippin, who would be Thain of the Shire. Now, as I tend to do with epic character histories concerning those who played very major roles in the stories they took part in, I'll try to narrow the scope of this video down to just Pippin and the major actions he took in impacting our story. There will be related articles and videos in the description and cards. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Born in 2990 of the Third Age in the time of spring, Peregrine Pippin was born to the Took family in the Great Smeals, the homes of the hobbits of Tuckborough. His hair was nearly golden. He was the great-great-grandson of the renowned Old Took, the son of Paladin Took and Eglantine Banks, making him a cousin of Meriadoc Brandybuck, Merry, and a distant relation of Frodo and Bilbo Baggins. He also had 3 older sisters. Now, he was born into a pretty noble family as far as hobbits are concerned, for his father Paladin Took would eventually become Thain of the Shire, a position created after the end of the Kings of Arnor and Arthedain, which was the master of the Shire Moot, an emergency gathering of hobbits, as well as the Shire Muster and Hobbitry in Arms, the emergency military of the Shire. As we see with Pippin later in the story, he would fulfill these duties to some degree even while his father held the office. Anyway, in 3001, Pippin and his family would attend Bilbo's infamous farewell party, and surely during this event and throughout many other times in his youth, he would spend time with his best friends, Merry and Frodo. Pippin would do some traveling across the Shire as well, coming to know Farmer Maggot, and he would grow a love for singing songs and for drinking beer in different inns throughout the Shire, as many hobbits did. Eventually, the time for Pippin's most renowned deeds would come in 3018 of the Third Age, when he was only 28, which was still quite young for a hobbit, as hobbits come of age on their 33rd birthday. Pippin would learn of Bilbo's ring at some point, perhaps from Merry after Merry had seen Bilbo use it many years before, and thus Pippin would be one of the conspirators, as they were called. Samwise Gamgee, Merry, Pippin, and Fatty Bolger, as they knew that when Frodo was moving away from Bag End, it was actually to deal with this ring. And so Pippin aided Frodo in the move to Buckland and journeyed with him from Bag End to Crickhollow, his new home, knowing that he would go even further than that to aid Frodo. Now, even during these early adventures, we see how Pippin was most definitely the youngest, most inexperienced, and unwise of the 4 hobbits, even after Merry joined them, thus making Pippin the character of the entire Fellowship of the Ring that was to be the one who needed the most maturation and growth. For instance, Pippin wished to visit Stock for beer at the Golden Perch, even though they were in dire need of haste, and he would eat a good amount of the elven bread left for the hobbits by Gildor and the Elven Company, and only left some for Frodo at Sam's request. Even after Buckland, Pippin would need saving from Old Man Willow and the Barrow Downs, even though he was perhaps most suspicious of the Old Forest, not having acquired much strength or wisdom in survival skills yet. At this point, Pippin's Tookish nature and love for his friends was that which drove him forth. In the Barrow Downs, he would acquire a dagger of Westernesse, which he would use as a short sword for the rest of his adventure. However, Pippin still did not understand the peril of their mission and spoke openly of Bilbo's birthday at the Prancing Pony, putting Frodo in a precarious situation which led to the Nazgul assaulting the Prancing Pony. Indeed, Pippin's time was coming, but was not yet upon him, as discussed by Gandalf and Elrond at Rivendell. For while Elrond wished to send both Merry and Pippin back to the Shire, Gandalf's wisdom and foresight knew that they would be needed. However, there would still be a time during which Gandalf perhaps regretted this decision, as he never attempted to hide his annoyance of the one he called Fool of a Took, such as in Moria. Indeed, it may even be argued that Pippin's actions in the Old Kingdom of Khazad-dûm cost Gandalf the Grey his life, which ultimately led to Gandalf the White in the end, whose power would be needed in the world. Pippin would cast a stone down a well, alerting the creatures of Moria to their presence, and leading to the Battle of the Chamber of Mizarbul, and Gandalf's fall with Durin's Bane. Surely Pippin would regret his actions, and indeed we must wonder if this led to Pippin growing in wisdom and taking more responsibility for his fallible actions. Pippin would be given a belt of silver and gold by Galadriel and Lothlorien, as well as a cloak and elvish brooch, and he was taken into consideration by the Fellowship as they decided where their future paths must go. Aragorn proposed the idea that Pippin and Merry would go with Boromir and Legolas to Minas Tirith if their paths were to diverge. However, this plan would obviously not go into place, for after learning that Frodo had disappeared and fled from Boromir, Pippin, along with his cousin Merry, took off in search of him upon Parth Galen, near the Ælfwine River. At this time, orcs and Uruk-hai from Isengard attacked, and Boromir of Gondor gave his life to defend Merry and Pippin, even as they would attempt to protect Boromir after his fall. The hobbits would be taken captive by these servants of evil, never forgetting Boromir's sacrifice made on their behalf. Indeed, I actually think this affected Pippin the most, as he would later go on to serve Gondor and Boromir's father. While the hobbits were being taken back to Isengard, Pippin began to take action to aid his position and survivability, having shown some growth from previous events. He would drop his elven brooch, allowing Strider and the others to find his path, and Pippin would use his wit in speaking with the orc Grishnach to even imitate Gollum, getting the orc to take them away from the main orc host ere it was destroyed by the Riders of Rohan, probably saving their lives. Pippin and Merry would escape into Fangorn, eventually meeting Treebeard and the other Ents, and by talking to him, the two hobbits encouraged the Ents to take action against Isengard, and the hobbits fought alongside with them, becoming good friends with the Ent Quickbeam while the Ents made up their minds about all of this. It is also worthy to note that Pippin and Merry grew to be the tallest of all hobbits in history by drinking the Ent Draught, as thematically they were well on their way to becoming mighty soldiers in their own right. Thus, Isengard and the designs of Sauron, which had originally seen them captured, were destroyed by the actions of these two hobbits. The hobbits would once more meet up with Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli in the wreck of Isengard, and would bear witness to Gandalf's confrontation with Sauron. Once more, Pippin's unchecked curiosity would get the better of him, for after Wormtongue threw the Palantir out of Isengard, Pippin would pick it up and have it taken from him by Gandalf. This encounter would gnaw at Pippin's mind until he could resist it no more. On the outskirts of the Vale of Isengard, Pippin would not be able to sleep and would steal the Palantir from Gandalf to look into it. This time, Pippin actually used it, becoming the first and only hobbit to ever use one of the Seeing Stones. This also made Pippin, the meekest member of the Fellowship, one of the only ones to speak directly to the Dark Lord Sauron himself, who would believe that Pippin was an Orthanc with Saruman and had the One Ring. This contributed to Sauron fully turning against Saruman, as well as Gandalf taking Pippin into Minas Tirith, knowing that war was on the horizon. Thus, it is through the eyes of Pippin that we first see the White City of Gondor in all of its splendor in the books. During his first meeting with Denethor the Steward, Pippin would swear fealty to Gondor and the Great Man, for Denethor's son Boromir had saved his life. And so it was that Pippin was taken into the service of the Citadel and Steward, becoming a knight of Gondor, at least in part. Gandalf would not speak against this act of kindness and pity, although, as always, he was partially annoyed by Pippin's actions. During his time in service of Denethor, Pippin would befriend another guard named Beregond, as well as his son named Burgil. Pippin, still young at about 29, would see Burgil as a kindred spirit, exploring the city with him, and Pippin would admire and respect Beregond. Pippin would also befriend Faramir before he received his injuries. Just as hobbits had aided the North Kingdom of Arnor during its time of need, Pippin was named Ernil-i-Herianath, the Prince of the Halflings, and rumors circulated that Pippin's allegiance to Gondor also came with 5,000 hobbits to defend the city, which was, unfortunately, untrue. However, Pippin would delight the folk of the city and Denethor himself, for in the Hobbitish dialect, Pippin did not speak with formals, not even with the steward, as he could not. Pippin would be instrumental during the siege of Gondor, for, in despair, Denethor sought to burn himself and his son Faramir alive, as the brother of Boromir was thought by his father to nearly be dead. Pippin did right by Boromir in saving his brother, as he told Beregond about the pyre, and Beregond would go on to slay his own men to save Faramir, and of course Pippin would find Gandalf to also help save Faramir. And so by the actions of Pippin, the line of the stewards of Gondor was saved. After the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Pippin found Merry in a side street of the city, who suffered from fighting the Witch King, and with Gandalf he brought Merry to the Houses of Healing, to be saved by Aragorn. Both Pippin and Merry had proven Gandalf correct in his debate with Elrond, of whether they should go on the adventure or not, for already the two hobbits had accomplished many great deeds. After all of this, Pippin and Merry would catch up with Gimli and Legolas, and then, while Merry rested and healed in the Houses of Healing, Pippin would go on with the Host of the West to the Black Gate, being the representative of all hobbits against Sauron and his evils. He He stood in the front ranks of Prince Imrahil, alongside his friend Baragond, and Pippin understood the despair of Denethor in that hour. Yet he looked at his blade of Numenor, knowing it was made for such an hour. He wished he could use it to smite the mouth of Sauron, for that deed would nearly match Merry's deed in stabbing the Witch King. But Pippin would go on to do whatever was needed of him. Indeed, during that Battle of the Black Gate, Pippin would use this blade to save his friend Baragond, and Pippin would lay low a great troll chief, even though it landed upon him. Before all went dark, Pippin saw the eagles come to their aid in that hour of doom. But it was not the end, as Gimli recognized Pippin's foot from under the troll, and he cleaved through the monster to save his friend. And Pippin was saved, as was the West, for the One Ring was destroyed in Mount Doom. Pippin would afterwards be honored alongside his kin as heroes, and he remained a knight of Gondor, one that Aragorn could call upon. Ironically, as the hobbit who used the Palantir, Pippin also wished that they had a seeing stone to communicate with Aragorn. Sometime later, Pippin and the other hobbits returned to the Shire, seeing that just as they had devastated Isengard with the Ents, Saruman devastated their home with Industry. It was no matter for these great heroes, and Pippin, in his armaments of Gondor and Troll's Bane's sword, would defend Frodo's honor from a brigand, and that was only the beginning. During the scouring of the Shire, Pippin raised a mighty host of strong hobbits in Tookland to defy the servants of Saruman, and he commanded the force alongside Merry during the Battle of Bywater. Once Saruman was defeated, Pippin would help set the Shire right again, inspiring other hobbits with his stories, great height, and armor of Gondor. In the time after the events of The Lord of the Rings, some years later, Pippin married a hobbit named Diamond of Longcleave, and they would have a son named Faramir Took. At age 44, Pippin became the 32nd Thain of the Shire, and would be made a counselor of the North Kingdom by King Elisar, and would even meet with the king at the Brandywine Bridge sometime later. King Elisar would add the land of Westmarch to the Shire, and at Sam's request, Pippin appointed Fastred, Sam's son-in-law, the first warden of Westmarch. A copy of the Red Book of Westmarch, held by Fastred's wife and Sam's daughter Eleanor, would come to the Great Smeals, Pippin's home, and much lore would be added, even by Pippin and Merry both. In the twilight years of Pippin's life, at the age of 94, in the year 63 of the Fourth Age, Pippin and Merry would leave their offices to their sons, and travel once more to Rohan and then on to Gondor. Seeing King Éomer before he passed away, and then spending their remaining years in Gondor, Pippin brought with him the Thain's Book, his copy of the Red Book and its added lore, and thus it would come to Gondor, as with the great stories we know from Middle-earth today. A few years later, Pippin and his best friend Merry would pass away, their bodies coming to lie in Rathdinnen, the very place where Pippin had saved Faramir many years before. And after Aragorn, King Elisar, died, they would be laid beside him, and would rest in friendship for the rest of the history of Middle-earth. And so we come to the end of our tale about Pippin, the hobbit whose story took him from ignorance to wisdom, and from foolishness to courage. From the story of Pippin, we see that, with courage in our hearts and a desire to do good, we may act for the betterment of the world. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this epic character history on Pippin. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on his story? Let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy Pippin, as his foolish beginning makes his heroic end quite incredible. Thanks to our Valor Tier patrons, Adrian De La Torre, Chris Ortner, Kyle Wetzel, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putenham, Mark Kralik, Blair Scout, Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Matt Sabatch, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Ben Gardner, Kondar, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrolik, Kuzan, Brandon Glidden, Molly Sullivan, Daniel Burns, and Anthony Harmon. Thank you so much, and thanks to all of our patrons and YouTube members. The support means a lot. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video looking at what was east and south of Middle-earth. You all are the best, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.